My husband and his friends thought it would be hilarious to leave me stranded in a tiny town in Italy after a fight. Let's see how she gets back, they laughed, driving off. I didn't return. A month later, he hunted me down in Greece, but by then, I had already begun building a new life. Let's see how she gets back. Gabriel laughed again, his voice slicing through the soft evening air as he slammed the car door. The taillights of our rental grew smaller and smaller, finally disappearing around a sharp bend in the narrow Italian street, leaving behind nothing but a cloud of dust and the haunting echoes of laughter. I stood frozen, my mouth still half open mid-sentence. The argument we'd been having outside the small cafe suddenly felt meaningless compared to his unimaginable betrayal. He's coming back, I whispered under my breath, drawing curious glances from locals who were savoring their evening meals at sidewalk tables. If this message speaks to your heart, let us know in the comments below. Like, share, and subscribe so you never miss a moment of truth, healing, and hope. If you enjoyed this story and it touched your heart, let us know in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe so you never miss out on future stories. This is just to scare me, I told myself, but the knot in my stomach twisted tighter as the minutes dragged into an hour, and the sky grew darker over the unfamiliar town, a town whose name I couldn't even pronounce properly. Before we continue, I just want to thank each of you for being part of this journey. If you are drawn to stories about women finding strength in unexpected places after betrayal, consider subscribing. It's completely free and supports more stories of resilience and rebirth. Now, let's step into the night with a woman who turned a savage act of cruelty into the fierce beginning of her freedom. When I had begged Gabriel not to drink so heavily at lunch, never in my wildest imagination did I think it would spiral into something like this. His friends, his old college buddies, gathered for their annual guys' reunion that I had reluctantly agreed to join, only fueled his recklessness. "She's always controlling you, man," Pete had said, waving for another round of drinks. When I stood up to leave, Gabriel stumbled after me, his words slurred but his anger sharp-edged and vicious. The fight exploded fast, with years of buried resentment erupting between us, like a volcano. "Your purse has your passport, right?" he sneered before climbing into the driver's seat. "Then you'll figure it out. You're so smart. Always telling me what to do." Night swallowed the charming little Italian town that had seemed so postcard perfect just hours earlier. It now loomed over me, menacing and unfamiliar. I counted my money. €80, $37. Nowhere near enough for a flight home. Barely enough for a night somewhere safe. My credit cards? Gabriel had them. He'd offered to carry them earlier, when my tiny purse had been too stuffed. I found the cheapest pension I could. A dingy room above a bakery, with a narrow bed and a chipped sink shoved into the corner. The elderly woman who led me upstairs spoke no English, but her kind eyes seemed to grasp my plight. She patted my arm, a silent thread of sympathy. He blocked me. I murmured to the empty room, staring in disbelief at my phone. 27 calls to Gabriel, all dumped straight to voicemail. Text delivered, but coldly ignored. I tried Pete, then Marco, then every one of Gabriel's friends who had been in that car. Blocked. Every single one. A shudder trembled through me as the awful truth took shape. This hadn't been a drunken whim. It had been calculated. A cruelty planned with laughter and malice. Sleep came in broken, jittery scraps, shattered by frantic checks of my phone and waves of panic. By morning, I clung to the hope that this would end, that Gabriel would return, furious that I had overreacted to his so-called joke. I would be furious too, but secretly relieved enough to patch it up. We'd fly back to Boston, to the life we had so carefully curated. Him, the celebrated architect. Me, the devoted wife who had shelved her own budding design career to manage his home, his calendar, his life. But he didn't come. The second day, I rationed my scant money, buying only a cheap panini for lunch. I wandered the town's edges, checking every hotel, every restaurant, searching desperately for a trace of our tour group. By that evening, cold dread settled into my bones. They had left me behind, and they weren't coming back. The journey had moved on to Florence without me. On the third day, a kind cafe owner who had noticed me lingering outside his shop offered me a free espresso and, in broken English, gave me directions to the local police station. The officer there listened to my story with a weary expression, as if abandoned tourists were a daily occurrence. His limited English, paired with my non-existent Italian, left me with little more than a filed report and a sympathetic nod. That afternoon, I faced the hardest decision of my life. Standing before a cramped pawn shop window, my fingers trembled as I twisted off my wedding ring. The 2-carat diamond Gabriel had upgraded on our 5th anniversary, replacing the modest little band we had started our marriage with. The shopkeeper barely glanced at it before offering me far less than it was worth, but enough to fund the next step of my journey, wherever that might lead. America? Call family, the pawnbroker suggested, counting out euros into my shaking hands. I nodded, almost robotically, but inside, a different plan was slowly taking root. Family meant explanations. Family meant enduring my mother's inevitable "I told you so" about Gabriel's volatile temper. Family meant facing friends who had quietly noticed the cracks in our marriage, cracks I'd fought so desperately to plaster over. The bus station was almost deserted when I arrived. Its flickering electronic board displayed destinations I had only ever seen in glossy travel magazines. An overnight bus to Rome, which connected to ferries to other buses to places where Gabriel and his friends wouldn't even think to look for me, if they even bothered. My finger hovered over my father's name in my contacts. One call, and he'd wire money for a flight home. One call, and I would tumble back into the life I had built, a life where I had slowly made myself smaller and quieter, just to accommodate Gabriel's expanding ego and endless demands. A memory surfaced unbidden, Gabriel laughing as he hid my design portfolios when I dared to mention returning to work in interior design. "Why complicate things?" he'd said, flashing that charming grin.
"We don't need the money.
"I need you focused on our life." I had laughed then, brushing it off. But sitting there, in that grimy station with peeling walls and broken benches, I saw it clearly for what it was: another fence, another bar in the invisible cage he'd built around me. "Where you go?" asked the ticket agent, an older woman with kind, patient eyes who had been watching me stare at the departure board for nearly 20 minutes. "Greece," I answered, the decision solidifying the moment the word left my lips. "The furthest coastal village you can get me to." 14 hours later, I stumbled off the final bus of my journey. My body ached from sleeplessness and tension. The sharp scent of salt air and the earthy perfume of olive groves wrapped around me as I gazed at the whitewashed buildings of a village whose name I still couldn't pronounce. My phone had died somewhere between countries. My stomach gnawed with hunger, and the crushing weight of what had been done to me, or perhaps what I had finally escaped, pressed heavily on my shoulders. Exhaustion blurred the edges of my vision as I staggered toward what seemed to be the town center. 3 days of emotional whiplash had left me raw, my mind cycling between white-hot rage at Gabriel, cold terror about my uncertain future, and something new, something dangerous, something like freedom. If this message speaks to your heart, let us know in the comments below. Like, share, and subscribe so you never miss a moment of truth, healing, and hope. My remaining euros would barely cover 2 nights in the cheapest room I could find. After that, I would have no plan, no connections, no words beyond please and thank you in the local language. Yet, as I stood there, watching the sunset splash the Aegean waters with molten gold and tender pink, a serenity settled into me, a calmness I hadn't felt in years. Gabriel had meant to punish me. He had meant to show me how helpless I was without him. Instead, he had accidentally unlocked my cage. He had set me free. The Greek sun was relentless as I wandered further from the village. My feet burned inside the flimsy sandals, shoes meant for casual sightseeing, not trekking across dusty hills. My water bottle had run dry hours ago, and the brutal mix of dehydration, hunger, and emotional fatigue made the world sway dangerously around me. Silver-green trees lined the cracked dirt path, their leaves shimmering like scattered coins in the gusting breeze. Olive groves, I thought distantly, right before my knees buckled. The earth rushed up to meet me, but I barely registered the impact. Darkness seeped in at the edges of my vision. A strange, eerie calm stole over me. Maybe this was fitting. Abandoned by my husband in one country, only to collapse alone in another. I closed my eyes, surrendering at last to the exhaustion that had been clawing at me since Gabriel slammed that car door and drove away. Phosmo, Kira, a woman's voice sliced through the heavy haze in my mind. Rough but tender hands turned me over. An elderly face swam into focus, deep lines etched into her skin, her kind eyes wide with concern. If you enjoyed this story and it touched your heart, let us know in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe so you never miss out on future stories. She spoke again, words I couldn't understand, but somehow felt wrapping around me like a lifeline. Rapid words tumbled from the woman's mouth in Greek as she patted my cheeks and thrust a canteen into my trembling hands. The water revived me just enough to struggle into a sitting position, though the world around me still spun violently. She introduced herself as Elena, repeating her name patiently while pointing at her chest. Weakly, I mirrored her gesture. Alexis, I croaked out. Elena's small frame belied her surprising strength as she helped me to my feet, steadying me with gentle but firm hands. She pointed toward a stone farmhouse nestled in the rolling sea of olive trees, mimicking walking with her fingers. I nodded, too drained to argue, and let her guide me slowly up the hill. The farmhouse kitchen greeted me like a balm, filled with the earthy scent of herbs strung from rough-hewn beams and something rich and savory bubbling away on an ancient stove. Elena settled me into a chair at a battered wooden table, then called out, her voice lifting into the rafters. A man's voice answered. Moments later, an elderly gentleman appeared in the doorway, wiping his weathered hands on a cloth. Nikos, Elena said proudly, pointing to him. Her husband nodded at me, cautious but not unfriendly, his dark eyes reading me carefully. Elena placed a glass of cool water into my hands, her fingers warm and insistent, and then offered me a bowl of simple soup. As the aroma hit my nose, my stomach betrayed me with a loud, eager growl, earning a bright smile from Elena. That evening melted into a blur of attempts at communication. Through broken words, wild hand gestures, and eventually helpless tears, I tried to tell my story. Elena nodded along, as though she understood everything, even though I knew she couldn't possibly catch the whole tangled web. Nikos remained mostly silent but watchful, occasionally speaking brief questions that Elena translated through looks and movements. They offered me their spare room, a humble space with whitewashed walls and a narrow bed draped in a lovingly handmade quilt. Too exhausted to argue, I collapsed into the bed and surrendered to the deepest sleep I'd had in days. Morning arrived wrapped in the crowing of roosters and the mouth-watering scent of fresh bread. At the foot of the bed, I found clean clothes neatly folded, a simple cotton dress and a cardigan, their fabric faded but freshly laundered. They hung loosely from my frame, but felt like armor after days in my wrinkled, grimy travel clothes. In the kitchen, Elena beamed at the sight of me and immediately served up strong, dark coffee with slices of fresh bread soaked in olive oil and sweet golden honey. As the bright daylight sharpened my senses, a wave of embarrassment flooded me. These people had taken me in, fed me, clothed me, without asking anything in return. I needed to explain myself. I needed to offer payment to move on. Using a mix of broken English and the translation app on my now-charged phone, thanks to an old adapter Nikos had unearthed, I tried to express my deep gratitude and my intention to leave for the village. Elena's face fell instantly. She shook her head vigorously, pointing first to the window, where rain now drummed steadily against a glass, and then to my still raw, blistered feet. "Stay," she insisted, one of the few English words she seemed to know, her voice both firm and pleading. Over the next 3 days, I tried multiple times to leave, but each attempt was gently blocked. Once, with my purse in hand and my shoes on my sore feet, Elena caught me at the door, her expression so stricken that guilt sliced through me. She took my hand without a word and led me to a small wooden box resting on the mantel. Opening it with shaking fingers, she showed me a collection of worn photographs. Her hands trembled as she pointed to the image of a young woman who bore her eyes and Nikos's smile. "Sophia," she whispered, then pointed far across the room, miming distance. "Australia," she said sadly, her voice catching. Tears shimmered in her eyes as she cradled invisible arms, then held her hand at waist height, gesturing the size of a child. "Grandbaby," she managed in English, then pointed to a newer photo of a laughing infant. "No see," she finished softly. The understanding hit me like a silent blow. Elena saw me as a stand-in for her absent daughter, a fragile presence to fill the aching void left behind. Rather than feeling manipulated, my heart cracked wide open for her grief. I nodded slowly, tucking my purse back onto its hook by the door. Each day began to weave new rhythms into my life. I started to integrate into their quiet world of farming and home. Elena taught me how to gather eggs from the clucking hens without startling them, how to hang laundry so that the mountain breezes would catch and dry it perfectly. Nikos showed me how to recognize the good shoots from the weeds in their sprawling vegetable garden, chuckling patiently when I mistakenly pulled up an herb on my first try. The work was hard, raw, and utterly different from the carefully curated life I had lived in Boston. There were no sleek gyms or manicured exercise routines here, only the honest ache of muscles pushed to their limits. New calluses hardened on my palms. Strange new aches blossomed in muscles I hadn't known I had. But every evening, despite the exhaustion, a quiet, powerful satisfaction pulsed in my bones. But with every passing day, the pain dulled a little more, and my strength slowly returned. More importantly, the endless mental replay of my abandonment began to quiet, replaced instead by the simpler, tangible concerns of farm chores and halting attempts at language learning. At night, sitting on the small porch while Elena knitted and Nikos smoked his pipe, I found myself slipping into rare moments of peace. The betrayal still cut deep, but here, surrounded by the ancient olive groves and the steady heartbeat of rural life, it started to feel less like the tragic end of my story and more like an unexpected new chapter. 2 weeks after my arrival, Elena sat beside me as we shelled peas from the garden. She studied my face with a look of careful thoughtfulness before asking, slowly, in her improving English, "Home? You want go home?" She made a plain motion with her hand, then pointed toward America. The question struck me like a thunderclap. Home. The word summoned images of our polished Boston brownstone, full of sleek designer furniture and perfectly matched decor. It also dragged up Gabriel's tight grip on every part of my life, his controlling management of our finances that left me without true independence, his subtle discouragements that thinned out my friendships, his cool dismissal of my ambitions. Tears spilled freely down my cheeks as the words tumbled out, a torrent that Elena couldn't fully understand but whose emotion needed no translation. I spoke of Gabriel's betrayal, of the years spent quietly giving up pieces of myself for the sake of peace, of the final humiliation, abandoned like forgotten luggage in a strange land. Elena's weathered hand covered mine with steady warmth as I broke. When I finally finished, spent and trembling, she pointed first to her heart, then around the small farm, and finally to me. The meaning was simple, powerful. I had a place here if I wanted it. "Work," I said carefully, miming Nikos tending the olive trees. "I stay. I work." Elena's smile bloomed slow and brilliant, like the sunrise over the Aegean. She nodded, squeezing my hand before returning to the peas, as if we had just agreed on something as ordinary as tomorrow's breakfast rather than a complete redirection of my life. My decision to stay marked the beginning of my education in olive farming. The very next morning, Elena shook me awake while the stars still littered the sky, handing me sturdy work clothes and worn boots that had once belonged to Sophia. Half asleep, I stumbled after her and Nikos to the grove, where the first soft fingers of dawn barely brushed the ancient trees. "Elis," Elena said, pointing at the heavy-laden branches. She demonstrated the technique, gently combing the branches with wooden rakes so the olives dropped onto nets spread below. My first clumsy attempt brought down more twigs and leaves than olives, earning me a patient but firm correction from Nikos. By mid-morning, with the sun fierce overhead, my shoulders screamed in protest, and the delicate hands that once held nothing heavier than shopping bags had sprouted their first raw blisters. "Boston lady hands," Elena teased with a chuckle, gently examining my palms. At lunch, she disappeared into the house and returned with a homemade salve that smelled richly of herbs and beeswax. The cooling balm was immediate relief as she rubbed it into my battered skin. "Tomorrow, better," she promised. Surprisingly, she was right. Each day brought small improvements, my technique refined, my strength deepened, my hands hardened. Within weeks, I could work alongside them without complaint, my heart swelling with a fierce, simple pride at the sight of the growing piles of harvested fruit. The sorting proved even more meticulous than the picking. Under the shade of a pergola, we sat at a long table and carefully separated the olives by quality. Perfect ones for premium oil, slightly blemished for second grade, and the damaged ones set aside for soap making. Elena watched me with the sharpness of a hawk, her corrections frequent at first, but slowly fading as my eye grew sharper, more confident. "You learn fast," Nikos said one evening, his English improving along with my stilted Greek. It was the highest praise he had given me yet, and it filled my chest with a quiet, steady warmth. My education spilled beyond the grove and into Elena's kitchen, a place that at first intimidated me with its lack of modern gadgets and shiny appliances. In Boston, I'd prided myself on being a good cook, following glossy recipes from gourmet magazines for carefully orchestrated dinner parties to impress Gabriel's colleagues. But Elena's kitchen was an entirely different world. No measuring cups, no digital timers, just intuition, tradition, and a lifetime of knowledge. "Watch," she'd instruct, her hands expertly kneading dough for bread. I mimicked her movements, failing miserably at first. My first loaves emerged from the outdoor stone oven either dense as bricks or blackened beyond saving. "Practice," Elena encouraged, breaking apart even my worst disasters to taste them, refusing to let any effort go to waste. Her patient acceptance of failure felt revolutionary to me. In my old life, mistakes were shameful, hidden. Here they were stepping stones, proof of learning. The simplicity of their meals stunned me too. Everything we ate came from the land or nearby farms. Vegetables still warm from the sun. Eggs gathered fresh that morning. Cheese from the neighbors' goats. The flavors were pure, needing little more than olive oil, lemon, and herbs from Elena's garden. My body changed too. The designer clothes I'd brought grew looser with every day, as the polished weight I'd carried melted away, replaced by lean muscle and a sturdier frame shaped by honest work. Muscle hardened where softness once ruled, and my complexion, once maintained with expensive creams, now glowed from nothing more than simple olive oil, soap, and honest sweat. When I caught a glimpse of myself in the small mirror above the bathroom sink, a stranger stared back at me, tanned, stronger, somehow more solid despite weighing less. As my Greek vocabulary slowly blossomed, Elena and I found new ways to bridge the gaps between us, sharing more than just work and meals. During our evening breaks, she would bring out old photo albums, yellowed and fragile, pointing proudly to black and white snapshots of her youth in the village. I was amazed to discover that Elena had once been a schoolteacher before she returned to her family's olive business after marriage. "You?" she asked, mimicking typing on an invisible keyboard. I pulled out my phone, showing her photos of the interior design projects I had worked on before marriage, the career Gabriel had so easily dismissed as just a hobby. Elena studied the images carefully, nodding and pointing to the elements she admired, making soft sounds of appreciation. "Beautiful thinking," she said, tapping her temple with a knowing smile. That simple validation, so effortlessly given, brought tears burning to my eyes. Such a small acknowledgement, and yet something Gabriel had drained from my life drop by drop as our marriage wore on. One rainy afternoon, Elena taught me how to knit. Her patience was endless as I fumbled, dropped stitches, and wove uneven, lopsided rows. My first completed project was a humble scarf, lumpy and far from perfect, but it was entirely my own creation. When I wrapped it around my neck, I felt a pride deeper than anything I'd felt wearing the designer cashmere Gabriel had once given me for Christmas. Other handmade treasures soon followed. A clay mug shaped under Nikos's watchful guidance, a woven basket I learned to craft from a neighbor. Each item told a story of mistakes, perseverance, and connection, richer than anything money could buy. As my collection grew, my need for material perfection fell away. After 3 months of working only for room and board, Elena approached me one morning with Nikos at her side. They led me to a small building where they pressed and bottled their olive oil, showing me the modest rows of golden product we had harvested together. Market day, Elena announced, pointing to a date on the calendar, her eyes twinkling. The village market was alive with energy, farmers and artisans proudly displaying their goods, while locals and the occasional curious tourist wandered among the stalls. Elena and Nikos set up their simple table, arranging bottles of olive oil, bars of handmade soap, and jars of preserved olives. To my surprise, they gently nudged me to the front of the booth, encouraging me to greet the customers. My broken Greek and their halting English often created hilarious, tangled moments, but laughter came easily, and slowly but surely, sales added up. As the market wound down, Elena handed me a small envelope, her expression serious. "Your part," she said simply. "Fair work, fair pay." I stared at the envelope, feeling its humble weight in my hands, maybe enough for a modest meal in the lavish restaurants Gabriel and I used to frequent. But this money was something far more precious. Independence. Earned through my own hands, free of hidden strings or whispered expectations. That night, I slid the envelope beneath my pillow, reaching for it every so often, just to feel its reassuring presence. In our marriage, Gabriel had carefully taken control of our finances, offering me credit cards that linked back to accounts he scrutinized. This small stack of euros represented the first stone in the foundation of a new life, one that truly belonged to me. As I drifted into sleep, I realized something even more shocking. I hadn't thought about Gabriel at all during market day. My mind had been too busy, buzzing with Greek phrases, tallying sales, bursting with pride in our work. The space Gabriel had once occupied in my mind was shrinking, replaced by olive groves, kitchen lessons, and the growing certainty that I was capable of far more than he had ever allowed me to believe. The following week, Elena and Nikos invited me to dinner at the taverna in the village square, a first since my arrival. Wearing a borrowed blouse from Elena, I felt a nervous flutter in my stomach as we stepped into the lively, fragrant air of the taverna. The owner, Stavros, greeted Elena and Nikos with hearty embraces before turning his curious gaze toward me. "Our American," Elena said proudly in Greek, a phrase I had come to recognize and treasure. Stavros beamed, ushering us to a table that was clearly theirs by right of years. Over plates of grilled fish and local wine, Nikos cleared his throat, glancing at Elena before speaking in careful English. "Alexis, we want to talk business with you." His seriousness made my heart skip. Had I done something wrong? Were they asking me to leave? Elena quickly reached across the table, patting my hand with warmth before continuing where Nikos had left off. "We old now. 68, 70 years, she said, pointing between herself and her husband. "No children. Here. Sophia not coming back." Nikos nodded solemnly. "We think retire soon, 2-3 years. But olive trees." He swept his hand in a wide arc, 200 years old. "Need young hands." My breath caught, understanding creeping over me in a rush of disbelief. Elena smiled, her eyes crinkling with quiet hope. "You learn fast. Work hard. We teach everything." Then she spread her hands wide, as if placing a precious gift before me. "Business yours." The offer hit me like a sudden storm. They barely knew me, a stranger, an outsider, and yet they were offering me something I had not even dared to dream of. "But I don't know enough," I stammered, heart pounding. "The trees, the pressing, the selling." "You learn," Nikos said firmly. We teach. No rush. That night marked a new beginning, the true beginning of my apprenticeship. No longer just a guest, no longer just a wanderer. Something deeper, sturdier, had begun to take root. I became an extra pair of hands, heir to generations of knowledge. Each morning, Nikos took me through different sections of the groves, explaining how soil variations affected the flavor profiles of the olives, how to identify the earliest signs of disease, and when precisely to harvest each section for the best oil quality. Elena, on the other hand, focused on teaching me the business side. Her records were a combination of handwritten ledgers and basic computer spreadsheets that their grandson had set up during a holiday visit years ago. Her method of tracking expenses and income was functional, but outdated. I saw an opportunity to contribute beyond physical labor. Each evening, I spent time updating their systems, creating digital records that made inventory and sales tracking simpler. Look, I showed Elena one night, demonstrating how to filter the spreadsheet to reveal which oil varieties sold best at each market. Her eyes widened as patterns emerged from the numbers. Smart, she nodded approvingly. Boston lady brain. Good for business. With their blessing, I began implementing small marketing improvements. Our hand-labeled bottles received updated tags, with information about the flavor profiles and food pairings, knowledge I'd gained from countless cooking lessons with Elena. I created a simple brochure about their traditional methods, answering the questions tourists frequently asked at our market stall. As my Greek improved, I forged connections beyond Elena and Nikos's immediate circle. The pharmacist who provided Elena's blood pressure medication began stopping by our market stall, lingering for conversations that went beyond business. The baker's wife invited me to join her weekly coffee gathering with other village women, an intimidating but invaluable immersion in local language and customs. Stavros from the taverna became an unexpected ally when he began featuring our premium oil as a table offering. He placed small cards with our new labels prominently on each table, smiling and winking. Good for you, good for me, he explained. When I thanked him, I saw the impact. Word spread, and soon 2 other restaurants in neighboring towns contacted us about supplying their establishments. 6 months into my new life, I attended the baptism of the butcher's granddaughter, my first formal village celebration. Standing in the back of the small church, I watched the community ritual with a lump in my throat. The elderly priest noticed me and made a point of greeting me afterward. Switching to halting English, learned during seminary in Athens, he said, "You bring new life to Old Grove." His eyes twinkled as he added, "Good for village. Young people leave for Athens for America. Village needs new blood." His acceptance felt like the last barrier had fallen. From that moment on, invitations flowed more freely, to name day celebrations, impromptu gatherings at the beach, and even a village committee meeting about the upcoming summer festival. Each invitation wove another strand into the web of connection that held me in place. Yana, the weaver whose stall stood beside ours at the market, became a particular friend. In her 40s, widowed young, she possessed a sharp wit and a pragmatic outlook that reminded me of my college roommate. Our conversations, conducted in my improving Greek and her excellent English, ranged from business strategies to village gossip and even more personal reflections. "You never speak of America," she observed one quiet afternoon as we packed up our unsold goods. "Family there? Friends?" The question pierced me unexpectedly. I had grown so focused on building my new life that I had pushed thoughts of my old one aside. "My parents died years ago, a few friends." I trailed off, realizing how Gabriel had gradually isolated me from my support network. Always finding reasons why my college friends were problematic or my work colleagues. Yana nodded knowingly. "The husband who left you in Italy. You never say his name." "Gabriel," I said, the syllables feeling foreign on my tongue after months of silence. "His name is Gabriel, and he never searched for me." Her directness was refreshing, especially after months of Elena and Nikos's gentle avoidance of the topic. "I don't know," I admitted. "I haven't checked my phone." I gestured vaguely. "I've powered it on occasionally to take photos, but I've abandoned my American email and social accounts. I don't want to confront whatever might be waiting there." Yana's raised eyebrow told me that the conversation wasn't over, not by a long shot. Her words stayed with me that evening. After helping Elena prepare dinner, I retreated to my room and powered up my old phone. With trembling fingers, I connected to the farmhouse's basic Wi-Fi and logged into my long-neglected email account. Hundreds of unread messages flooded the screen. Scanning the senders, I spotted several from old friends. Their subject lines had evolved from casual check-ins to concerned inquiries. A surge of shame washed over me. I had disappeared from their lives without explanation, just as thoroughly as I'd vanished from Gabriel's. A thread from my former design mentor caught my eye. The subject read, "Job opportunity," followed by increasingly urgent follow-ups. Opening it, I saw that she'd recommended me for a remote consulting position with a sustainable building materials company. The final email, dated just 2 weeks earlier, indicated the position was still open. Should I be interested? Before I could consider this unexpected bridge to my former life, another email froze my fingers on the screen. It was from Gabriel Davis. The subject line read, "I know where you are." The timestamp showed it had arrived just hours earlier. My heart pounded as I clicked it open. "Alexis, it's taken months and a private investigator, but I finally tracked you to that back corner in Greece. This has gone on long enough. I'm coming to bring you home and end this ridiculous tantrum. My flight lands in Athens on Thursday. Be ready. 3 days from now." The room spun around me. Panic and anger collided in my chest. How dare he? After abandoning me, after months of silence, he expected to simply collect me like misplaced luggage? I stumbled downstairs, the phone clutched in my hand. Elena looked up from the account ledger spread across the kitchen table. Her smile faded as she registered my expression. "Bad news from America?" she asked gently. "Gabriel," I managed, my voice trembling. "He's coming here Thursday." Elena's eyes narrowed slightly. She reached beneath the ledger and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the table toward me. "Good timing then," she said. I was waiting for the right moment. Inside the envelope, I found legal papers bearing my name, alongside Elena and Nico's, written in Greek with English translations. "Partnership agreement," Elena explained. "1/3 business, yours now, not in the future. Now." Tears blurred my vision as I stared at the document, understanding its significance. Not just employment or apprenticeship, but a legitimate partnership. Not just a place to stay, but a foundation to build upon. Not charity, but earned recognition. "You choose what happens Thursday," Elena said firmly, tapping the papers. "You have a home here, business here, friends here." She pointed to the phone in my hand. "That man? He no longer decides." The truth of her words settled over me like a mantle of certainty. For the first time since being abandoned in that Italian town, I felt not just like I was surviving, but anchored. Gabriel was coming, but he would find a very different woman than the one he'd left behind. The following days passed in a blur of preparation. Not the kind Gabriel would expect, no packing of bags or tearful goodbyes, but emotional fortification. I visited Katerina, the village's only lawyer, who helped me draft divorce papers in both Greek and English. I contacted my old design mentor, tentatively accepting the remote consulting opportunity. I even wrote emails to friends I'd left behind, offering brief explanations without apologies. Thursday arrived with a perfect Greek summer sky, cloudless and bright. I was in the processing shed, testing olive oil samples with Nikos, when the unfamiliar sound of a rental car engine broke the afternoon quiet. Elena appeared at the doorway, her expression a mixture of concern and resolve. "He is here," she said simply. Heart hammering, I wiped my hands on my work apron and stepped outside. Gabriel stood beside a sleek silver sedan, designer sunglasses perched on his perfectly coiffed hair, examining the humble farmhouse with visible distaste. He wore the casual but expensive travel outfit I recognized from countless business trips, tailored chinos, and a button-down that probably cost more than a week's profit from our olive oil. He didn't notice me at first, giving me precious seconds to steady myself. This man, who had once been the center of my universe, now looked somehow smaller, less substantial, against the backdrop of ancient olive trees and weathered stone buildings that had become my home. "Gabriel," I called, my voice calmer than expected. He turned, and the shock that registered on his face was almost comical. His eyes traveled from my work boots to my sun-browned arms, lingering on my unstyled hair pulled back in a simple chignon. I watched recognition battle with disbelief across his features. "My God, Alexis, what happened to you?" The familiar disapproving tone, which once would have sent me scrambling to fix whatever he found lacking, now merely washed over me like a wave against rock. "Life happened," I replied, taking measured steps toward him. "What are you doing here?" He removed his sunglasses, his practiced charm sliding into place as he extended his arms. "I've come to take you home, of course. This has gone on long enough. Don't you think? Whatever point you were trying to make." "This isn't about making a point," I interrupted, stopping well outside his reach. "This is about making a life." His smile faltered behind me. I could see it. I heard the quiet shuffling of Elena and Nikos emerging from the house. Though they couldn't understand our words, they positioned themselves within view, silent guardians, ready to intervene if needed. Gabriel noticed them, his expression hardening. "Are these the people you've been staying with? Have they been holding you here?" I cut in, my voice steady. "They've been teaching me about olive farming, about community, about kindness without conditions." I gestured toward the groves surrounding us. "I'm part owner now. I have a business here." Disbelief crossed his face, followed quickly by the condescension I knew all too well. "A business, Alexis? Be serious. You're a designer, not a farmer. This is some eat, pray, love phase, isn't it? After our fight, I admit, I shouldn't have left you in Italy. It was a stupid, drunken mistake. I've apologized. Now it's time to come home." "You've apologized?" I echoed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips.
"When?"
"In what universe does tracking me down and demanding I return count as an apology?" His jaw tightened, the charm evaporating.
"Fine."
"I'm sorry I left you in Italy. It was immature and wrong. Is that what you want to hear? Can we move past this now?" "Why did you even look for me, Gabriel? It's been months. Why now?" He shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the elderly couple watching us intently. "Can we discuss this privately in the car, perhaps? They don't speak English, and I have nothing to hide from them. Why now?" I pressed again, my voice tinged with impatience. His shoulders slumped slightly. "Your parents have been calling, friends asking questions at events, clients wondering why you're not at the house when they visit. It looks..." He trailed off. "Bad for your image." I finished for him. "It damaged our reputation," he corrected sharply. "Our life together, the one we built over 10 years of marriage." "The one you built," I countered. "The one where I gradually became nothing more than an accessory to your success. Tell me, Gabriel, did you even notice how unhappy I was before Italy? Did you care?" His expression darkened. "We had a good life, Alexis. A beautiful home, financial security, respect in the community. What more could you possibly want? Purpose, connection, agency over my own choices." I gestured to the small stone house behind me. "I found all three here, in a place you dismiss as primitive and backward." "This isn't you," he insisted, desperation edging into his voice. "The Alexis I know wouldn't choose manual labor and poverty over comfort and position." I smiled, recognizing the fundamental truth in his statement. "You're right. The Alexis you knew wouldn't have. But that woman died in Italy when her husband abandoned her as a joke. The woman standing before you made different choices." Elena approached then, pressing something into my hand. It was the partnership agreement we'd signed. Though she couldn't follow our words, she'd sensed the moment had come. I unfolded the document and held it toward Gabriel. "I have legal ties here now," I said, my voice steady. "A business partnership, responsibilities to people who value me for my contributions, not my appearance or social connections." His face flushed with anger. "This is ridiculous. Whatever game you're playing." "It's not a game," I interrupted, reaching into my pocket for the envelope Katerina had prepared. These are divorce papers, Gabriel. Already filed, with provisions for the division of assets. He stared at the envelope as if it might burn him. You can't be serious. You'd throw away everything for this. I shook my head, my tone firm. I'm not throwing away anything. I'm choosing something better, something real. I stepped forward, placing the envelope in his rigid hand. You left me, Gabriel. You drove away, laughing. You just never expected I'd find my way without you. His fingers closed reflexively around the papers, his expression cycling through shock, anger, and finally, wounded pride. You'll regret this, he said, though the threat sounded hollow, even to his own ears. When the novelty wears off and you're still hauling olives in the hot sun at 60, you'll remember what you gave up. Maybe, I conceded, but I'd rather risk regret from choices I made than live with the certainty of regret from choices made for me. Nick stepped forward then, placing a weathered hand on my shoulder. Though he couldn't understand our exchange, he recognized the conclusion in our body language. He said something in Greek to Gabriel, his tone firm but not unkind. What did he say? Gabriel asked, his voice smaller now. He said the road back to Athens is dangerous after dark. You should leave now to reach the city before nightfall. Gabriel looked between us, finally registering that this wasn't a negotiation or a rescue. Goodbye, he muttered, without another word. He turned and returned to his rental car, the divorce papers still clutched in his hand. The vehicle disappeared down the dirt road, and Elena slipped her hand into mine. Together, the three of us turned toward the house. My house now, too. The evening's work awaited, oil samples to catalog, dinner to prepare, tomorrow's market inventory to check. My husband had once abandoned me in a foreign country, assuming I'd be helpless without him, assuming I'd come crawling back once I'd learned my lesson. Instead, I'd found fertile ground to plant new roots, stronger and deeper than he could have imagined. Sometimes, the cruelest actions yield the greatest gifts. Trying to break me, Gabriel had accidentally set me free.